I've got a very nice surprise for you.
Oh, what's that?
Well, it is someone that I know that you will enjoy meeting. Alice and dear guests, I would very much like to introduce to you Louise Pliss, who has come to see you.
Louise Pliss! Oh, Louise, how nice to meet you. I have always enjoyed your books. Hey, oh, nice to meet you. What a delightful surprise. Oh,
thank you, Mr. Wilson, for asking me to come here. I'm so happy to be here. I guess I never really left Gowanda, even though I spent most of my adult life away from here. I was born in 1913 and spent my entire childhood and high school years in Gowanda, on Erie Avenue to be exact. I came to this theater so many times, like everyone else in Gowanda. It was such an exciting event when a new movie came to town. In fact, that probably was the reason I went to college. Upon graduation from Gowanda High School, I attended the University of Michigan, where I studied theater arts. See, the Hollywood really did have a big influence on my life. One of my classmates was a man named Gerald Ford. He became president of the United States. And I really do think I remember telling him about this grand old place in my lovely little hometown. So after I graduated from the University of Michigan, I went to New York City to become an actress. But like so many other women my age, I found it was not a very easy way to make a living. And so I got myself a job in a bookstore. And I found that I really liked working in a bookstore. I think a lot of that was because I really had the opportunity to read so many fine books while I was at work. And so I got on a new career path. I went to Chicago, and I went to a famous bookstore called Rantano's. And I soon became head of the children's department because of a service that I developed. You see, I found that I loved reading and teaching children to read. So many times parents browsing through the books look for diversions for their children. I'd offer to read to the children, and I developed quite a reputation for that. Plus, I found that I really did love to teach children to read. A psychologist friend of mine noted this, and he persuaded me to go into teaching. So I returned to school, and I received a BA in elementary education. And then I started teaching at Calumet City, which is on the Indiana-Illinois line. And my final and most fulfilling job was in teaching at the University of Chicago Laboratory School. Every summer, though, I came home to 67 Erie Avenue so I could be with Miriam, my mom, David, my dad, my brothers Lozar and Ben, and my sisters Jenny and Jessie, and later my brother-in-law Hy Sacker, and my nephews David and Jerry. And David and Jerry remembered me. I liked to paint. I always wore a painter's hat. And I used to make cards, too, as you see, with flower patterns or little bird patterns. They had owls on them. I love Gowanda, and I really loved growing up here. In fact, Gowanda was the setting for my two most famous books. This is the first one, that's Summer on Catalpa Street. And I believe this was my second one, The Trip Down Catfish Creek, rather. I'm sorry. Anyhow, Catalpa Street I based on Erie Avenue, where I grew up, as I told you, and it had many, many catalpa trees. Catfish Creek is the cattaraugus, which was in my backyard. And the kids were based on my nephews, David and Jerry, and the other kids were composites. My childhood friends and the students had the lab school. The places, the businesses, the buildings, all were based on places I knew in Gowanda. I was very blessed to have such a rich heritage to draw upon for my inspiration. And you might find this really interesting. The first book actually grew out of a classroom discussion. I asked my students who were in third grade, what do you like in books? And they began brainstorming, and I offered to write a book for them based on the ideas they gave me. They told me what they'd like to see in the way of a plot and characters. I really wanted to be empathetic with them, and I wanted to write something that they would write if they had skills, vocabulary, the ability to express their thoughts, and attention spans, you know, a little more fully developed. So we worked on it all school year, and during the summer of 1959, armed with advice, suggestions, warnings, and 28 pairs of challenging eyes, I began to write. At the start of the new school year, I read the completed book to the students who are now my fourth graders, and they gave it their approval. So I submitted the manuscript to an agent, and my first novel became a reality in 1961. Second year, I wrote another book, and then I had two more. one published in 1963 and one published in 1965. Well, eventually I retired, and I continued to be active. I traveled extensively, and I love to be involved in political causes, especially politics. I campaigned actively for Adlai Stevenson. I would hand out materials on the streets near where I was teaching. Another interest that I always had was music. I learned to play piano when I was a girl, and I used to entertain most of Mary Avenue sitting in the front room playing on the piano. So then one day I was in the lab at the laboratory. I was in the basement of the laboratory school at the University of Chicago, and I found a piano. And I asked that they bring it upstairs to my classroom, and I incorporated it into my curriculum. I really wanted to share my love of Tchaikovsky and Chopin with the students. I wanted them to know the classics. Now, I never married. I guess I always felt that 10 months of the year I had enough children. My students needed me to fill in the gaps, you could say. They came from so many backgrounds. Some had a chance, and others would never have had a chance if I didn't provide for them. I exposed them to music, art, culture, history, and literature, and I let them fly. We painted in my room, we sang, and we read and we wrote. They were my life. In 1991, I passed away, and even though I'm buried in Chicago, I still come back home to visit.